Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. Today I'm going to be talking to Cynthia Levinson and Mirelle Ortega, and we are going to be talking about this amazing book. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to remind you that our online auction that we do every spring is coming up soon. So we are accepting items to that. If you go to the link in our bio, that will take you to the form if you have something you would like to share with us, and that is donate time. Hi.
Thrilled to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you both for joining. I always think it's so fun when we get to have an author and illustrator on together. It's really fun, like kind of behind the scenes on how the whole process works. But before we get started talking about your new book, Free to Learn, well, how about we start, maybe Cynthia, you can start, and then Mirelle, and tell us what was your journey for getting into doing children's books?
Oh, going that far back. The way back story is that in the year 2000, the cellist Yo-Yo Ma left his cello in a taxi cab in New York City, and I thought, that should be a children's book. So I wrote about 100 billion versions of it, and it came close to being published twice, and it won a national, sort of picture book draft competition. That one never got published, but I got hooked.
That's so funny. Do you ever think about going back and trying to do that one now?
No, I think the technology makes it obsolete, makes the story obsolete. Because everybody now, you get a receipt with the cab number and all that sort of thing, and you can just call them up and
It wouldn't
find
happen.
it. Yeah, 25 years ago, that was not the option.
What about you, Mirelle? How did you get started with illustration?
I get asked this question in like school visits all the time, and it's so hard because I just always really liked drawing since I was like a little girl. I was just drawing everything all the time. So like it was just never like I don't know what was like the big moment when I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Like it was just I think it's kind of like a given. I was gonna go to school for art, and that's what I did.
And why particularly doing children's books? I know
Oh.
you also do, but versus I guess other avenues you could have gone in.
Well, I just love books. Like I love books growing up. My mom loves books. My grandpa loved books. So like to me, that's just like a special thing about the medium. Like it's just beautiful and just very like it really lets your imagination go.
Mm-hmm.
So like I really did. I think I always really wanted to, and I don't know why I was like, I'm gonna go do animation and then I'll be able to do books. It didn't happen that way. I was as I was finishing, I did have like a master's. I did at Academy of Art University for visual development and animation, and as I was finishing that, someone was like, you can just be represented and like do books, and I was like, I didn't know. And
Well,
so I was like, oh, let me ask.
okay. Well, I'm curious because you do animation and you from what I saw, you also do illustration for middle grade and for chapter books.
Yeah.
Is your process different when you're doing picture books versus the other?
Yeah, I think it is. I did get that question when you sent the questions, and I was like, that's a great question.
Uh,
Yeah, I thought a lot about it. I think I personally I like my illustrations to always have like a lot of feeling
mm-hmm.
and a lot of charm
Mm-hmm.
and like just like characters that are very engaging. But I do think that depending on the medium, I am like my priorities switch a little bit from time from like, oh yeah, from like, so I feel like when I do like chapter books, I'm really like just concerned about characters and movement
Mm-hmm.
and, like silly faces and just things that like kids will find engaging.
Right.
And then when I do picture books, I am thinking more of like the whole picture, like
Right.
backgrounds and like feeling. I'm thinking a lot about feeling and a lot about flow, page to page. And then for middle grade covers, I think I'm thinking I'm just thinking of what would my 12-year-old self would like to see.
Right.
And like what because I bought so many books for the covers when I was a kid. I just like I'd be like, this one, like no clue what it's about. But so I'm just thinking like when an illustration has something special in it that really draws you in, and it's really hard to describe, but that's always like kind of what I'm trying to hit, like just something that it's like kind of you can feel, you know?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's
The
interesting.
palette is, oh, sorry, go
No, I
ahead,
was
Nan.
just going to say it's funny because I think most of us think a lot about the role of the illustrator with picture books, but not as much as chapter books or middle grade. But it's
Yeah.
true. Like I think most of us as kids, where you're drawn to the book because of the cover. So it is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Going to say, Cynthia?
I was going to say the palette that Mirelle chose in Free to Learn is just so beautiful. It's so perfect, um, from page to page and scene to scene, really. I think one of my favorites, yeah, that one is just so perfect for the setting for this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And I have to say, one of my favorites, oh, I mean, there are many, but if I could show this one, I don't know if you can see
Hold
this one right
it down
here.
a little bit for
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, good. That's better.
Mhm.
The colors are gorgeous, and the time of evening and the mood, it's just exquisite.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Cynthia, I'm curious. You have a background in education, and now you write mostly nonfiction with a focus on social justice. I mean, I have some of your other books behind me if people aren't familiar with them. So this is
Thank you.
not like an unusual theme for you. Um, why is it? I know you said that you especially want kids to learn about other kids that have made a difference. Why is that so important?
Well, we're in a time when kids are making a difference in terms of climate and political activism, but a lot of other kids are feeling frightened or stymied, and they don't need to. Um, I don't. I I don't want children to feel that they're responsible for changing the world. That puts a burden on kids, but they can play a part. Each child can do something, whether it's drawing a picture or writing a letter or I mean, this case was quite extraordinary where families sued a school district, for heaven's sakes. Was extremely courageous of all of them. But there are so many different ways that children can feel like they're playing a part, and give them a feeling of efficacy and activism and not having to feel passive, which kids often do in their daily lives.
Yeah, that's true. They're usually being told what to do and
Yeah,
by everyone else.
following the rules and all of that, which is important. But kids also can stick up for themselves.
Mm. I love that. And so you mentioned some about the book, but for those who haven't seen it, can you tell us what is this based on? And like what inspired you to turn this into a children's book?
Yes. Well, I've lived in Texas for 45 years, and I worked as you said, I worked in education in Texas for many years. And I knew about a case that went to the Supreme Court of the United States, which ruled that public schools must educate undocumented kids for free without charging them tuition. We take that as a given now. Of course, everybody can go to public school, or just about everybody can go to public schools. Um, but that wasn't the case. And in Tyler, Texas, which isn't too far from where I live in Austin, in 1977, the schools said that parents have to pay $1,000 per child
Mm.
to go to school, which was unthinkable. It's still unthinkable in 2025 that families could pay that much.
Mhm.
That came about because the Texas legislature in 1975 passed a law saying that schools could not spend local public money on educating undocumented kids. And so the Tyler Independent School District was simply following the law. Um, but four incredibly brave families who had a both undocumented children and children who were born in the States and had birthright citizenship, which is granted to them by the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. They sued, and their case went through a series of courts and finally ended up at the Supreme Court. What is shocking in a way is that the decision by the Supreme Court was 5-4. Only 5 justices ruled saying that schools do have to educate undocumented kids. Had one justice at that time changed his mind, and they were all men at the time, then it would have turned out completely differently.
Mhm.
And the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, has been threatening for the last 2 years to relitigate that case. And in fact, the Texas legislature is in session now, and a bill has been filed to bring that case up again. And we know that President Trump, one of his first actions as president, was to issue an executive order trying to rescind, to take away birthright citizenship, meaning that even though it says in the 14th Amendment that children born in the United States are automatically citizens,
Mhm.
he is trying to raise that question again. It's an extremely frightening possibility. Both of those are.
Yes, this is a very, even though the case is, as we had talked about, more than well, it was brought almost 50 years ago and resolved several years later. It still seemed it's so timely to be talking about this now. And Mirelle, I'm curious about you. When you heard about this, you've won so many awards for your illustration and so on. What drew you to this project? I mean, kind of what was your process for that?
Well, first of all, it was something that I had no idea about. So it was a good read. It was an interesting read to me. Like I love when I learn something from a book.
Mhm.
But then I think it was a feeling, I think it was a lot of feeling in it. And as an illustrator that likes, kind of showcasing that, I just like, I could see it in my head when I read it, and I was like, yeah, this seems like a good, like a good fit. I can do this.
And so what's your process then? Like, I mean, as far as like researching it, or how do you go about actually creating the illustrations?
Yeah, so it was challenging because we didn't have that many pictures and there's real people involved, and but also it's like slightly fictional too. So like we're doing characters not precisely like one to one, but you want to have like a little bit of a likeness.
Mm.
Um and also because it's set in the 70s, so I was like just doing a lot of research about like everything. Time really impacts the way things look.
Right.
I looked through so many like clothing catalogs for children because there's like
Mm.
multiple children in the book, the schools scenes and stuff. So I was like, what are people wearing in the 70s?
Right.
What's like a hairstyle that kids had in the 70s? Like, and it's like, I think like for kids, it's not as like extreme as like for adults, like
Right.
fashion wise. I feel like we have kept like very similar styles of clothing.
Hmm.
um, but yeah, that was challenging, just like settings, making sure the settings look like the settings in real life. And but also it was hard to find pictures from like the 70s from those settings. So it's like, well, we're guessing this is what they look like in the 70s too. Yeah, and just like kind of composition wise, when you're dealing with stuff that exists in the real world, sometimes, you will like it to be a little bit different, just so that it looks a little bit better, or like, balances out a little bit better. So it's like making decisions on like where are we changing things a little bit, and where it's like it should stay the same. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting process, especially like you say, when you're talking about real people, and yet not you're fictionalizing it a bit.
Yeah. So it's like you want them to look like them, but also it's like it's not really like, it's not like an exact, like it looks exactly like
Mhm.
them, because they are characters too. So it's challenging. It's like a fine line.
Yeah. And Cynthia, why is it so important for kids today to learn this history?
It's not just, well, if it's kids and it's adults as well. Um, Everybody needs to stick up for the rights of children and families. Um, Everybody needs to know that what's happening is being threatened, and we don't want to revert to those times
Right.
again. Yeah. And there are so just untold numbers of families that could be affected. And fortunately, um, I don't know the numbers, maybe millions of children and their children and grandchildren have gotten a good solid education because of this. So kids knowing and families knowing the importance of school is just really essential.
And something that struck me, I mean, I think I mentioned to you guys before we actually started that I was not familiar with this case at all, kind of like you, Mirelle. Like, I think a lot of people aren't. But it also seems so important for us to understand the law, but also because now undocumented immigrants are in the news a lot and often talked about like as a statistic and not really as humans. And this book does so much to really humanize them, talk about them on a human level. Could you talk about that a little bit and kind of the importance of having empathy? Oh, and also I just want to say, you had a comment. Thank you for writing these stories, Cynthia. Beautiful illustrations. And Mirelle, congratulations to you all. Thank you. Thank you. What a lovely comment.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much. Um, yeah, empathy is a really good way to think about it. I talked to Alfredo. So the book is called Free to Learn, and the subtitle is How Alfredo Lopez Fought for the Right to Go to School. And I drove up to Tyler and sat down, spent a good part of a day with Alfredo and his wife Angie and his sister as well. She was also one of the plaintiffs in the case. Um, and by phone, I talked with their daughter, Cassie. And later on, I Zoomed with Alfredo's parents, um, who were the ones who had, really filed the lawsuit along with three other families. And so getting to know them just made such a difference in writing the book and trying to make him and them come to life on the page through the words and, whatever ways I could help Mirelle bring them to life, in the illustrations. Um, the parents, Ama and Apa, are extremely modest people. Alfredo, the entire family, the kids had to be protected from knowing what was going on. Everybody had to be protected because Ama and Apa were truly afraid that they would be deported straight from the
Right.
courthouse. That they put all of their belongings in their car, thinking that they were just going to have to drive straight back to Mexico that day. Um, so they were incredibly courageous. But at the same time, they never said anything to the kids about what was going on. And Alfredo and the children knew nothing about the case until the 1990s because the parents just never said anything.
Wow.
Yeah,
Even after they won the case in the early
right.
80s, they never said anything.
Never said a thing.
Wow.
And finally, some years, I think on maybe the 25th anniversary or something, the parents were given an award by LULAC. I think it was LULAC, or no, it was another organization, which I should look up in the back matter because I wrote about it. Um, um, for their courage. Um, but just learning all of that background about how modest yet brave they were.
Malta.
MALDEF, thank you. Yes, Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, thank you. Um, yes, gave them an award. And the children are so proud of their parents for doing this. It just, shows. So I did a program about the book at the Texas Book Festival, and Alfredo and Angie came, and they're just so glad to know that the story is getting out. They're proud of their parents, and they're proud of the effects, knowing how widespread it is across the country.
What kind of reactions have you both gotten to the book? How has it been received?
Oh, Mirelle, yeah, why don't you want to share about that?
I think pretty much most of it, it's like I didn't know about this.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, me neither. Isn't it crazy? But yeah, I think it's just like an interesting part of history. I do think education is so important. And to me, it's like very striking how those families thought so too. Like so much so that they were willing to put everything on the line to make sure their children had an education and a way to a better life.
And I'm really pleased the Texas Book Festival made it a reading rock
Yeah.
star book. And Mirelle, you went to El
I
Paso, is
went to
that right?
El Paso. I read it with the children, and they all got a free copy. It's amazing. It's amazing the stuff that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's now the Children's Book Council named it a social studies notable book for last year, which I was really, really glad about. It was so nice to see that. And the comment that we just got, I've gotten a number of comments like that, and there's some Amazon reviews, and it got a starred review. I think it was in Booklist, Morale, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was very pleasing. A lot, even in Tyler, a lot of people don't know
Yeah.
about this case, which just seems amazing. We take it for granted that, of course, kids can go to school, but it's a right that could be taken away. So getting the word out about this is just really essential.
Well, congratulations to you both, and thank you to you both for bringing this story to light. I think so many of us are not familiar, and now more than ever, we really need to be understand what the rights are and how hard people fought to get them. And I was looking at the time. We only have a few minutes left. I want to give you guys time to talk about if you have any other projects upcoming. If you want to give a little shout out to those, maybe Mirelle, if you want to go first.
Yeah. Sure. I have a book that just came out in January called Mamiachi and Me, which I don't have to pull right now, but it's about a all-female mariachi band. Also with a beautiful back matter that explains a lot about the history of mariachi music and the history of women in mariachi music, which is not, something that you see a lot.
Right.
I think more so these days. I think more like mixed, like men and women's bands are more common now. Um, and then I have another book coming out in March called I Am, Yo Soy. It's exciting because it's a fully bilingual book. Like the pages are both in English and Spanish. And it's basically like a celebration of being a child of two cultures and coming from a Hispanic culture and living in America. So like it's about like all the little cultural things and how kind of bringing those traditions in kind of just expands the world and makes it
Right.
richer and better. So I think it's very sweet, very lyrical, really beautiful book.
I love that. We should mention that you are a writer as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
written not just the
Yes.
illustration. I'm afraid if I gave that impression.
I'm a writer too. I have my two books, Magic, Once Upon a Faraway Land, and River of Mariposas.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations, Mirelle.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to seeing those.
Yes.
How about you, Cynthia?
I had a book that just came out in January for older kids called Who Owns the Moon? It's really a departure for me and other conundrums of exploring and using space. And I've been having a lot of fun with this book, going around the country, but talking about um, not only what it's like to go to space, but really about space policy. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, problems like debris. I spent the last 2 days actually at a conference of space people. Um,
Oh, I think
and
I saw it on your Instagram, I think.
oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably right. And one of the space junk, for instance, is a big problem. And one of the people there who's very knowledgeable at the conference said, the sky is falling. Not to worry people too much. And this book, my husband and I wrote a book, Fault Lines in the Constitution. Thank you.
Yes.
The first edition came out in 2017, then the second in 2019, then there was a graphic novel version, and the third edition is coming out this summer.
Mm.
And there's another book underway that about civil rights, and I'm working on several other things.
Oh, you both are so busy. Well, I love it. It's so great. Thank you both for taking the time to talk with us. And obviously, when the new ones come out, we'll be sure to share those in our stories. But
Oh,
it was such a pleasure
thank you.
both.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
to
much.
both
Thank
of
you for
you.
having us. Yeah.
Yes, and for anybody who joined us late, as always, this is going to be up on Instagram in just a few minutes, and we'll also have it up on our YouTube channel. So thanks for everybody for watching, and thanks to you both for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.